Welcome to part 6 of the new imperialism. Now we're going to take a look at the Philippine-American War. When the Americans first arrived in the Philippines, what ensued was a three-way standoff. You had three groups there. You had the American forces, the Spanish forces they were trying to remove, and Filipino forces led by a independence leader named General Emilio Aguinaldo, right? General Aguinaldo proclaimed the Philippines independent on June 12, 1898, and he had hoped that the presence of U.S. forces would help him make his nation a protectorate of the United States, kind of like what was about to happen in Cuba, right? So initially, he's helping the U.S. forces get the Spanish out of the Philippines. The Spanish, by this point, are all just bottled up in Manila, in the city of Manila, okay? When McKinley decided, though, to directly annex the Philippines and make it an American colony, Aguinaldo and his men quickly turned on the U.S. occupiers, because now they didn't get rid of the yoke of one colonial ruler to be just placed under another. So on February 4th, 1899, Aguinaldo and his men attacked the American forces, right, in a battle that will leave 3,000 Filipino fighters dead and about 59 U.S. troops. Now, those are the kind of losses that Aguinaldo knew he couldn't afford to take. So realizing that he was not going to be able to take U.S. forces on in a head-to-head conventional fight, he changed tactics from conventional war to guerrilla war, right? He became an insurgency. The fight from this point forward is going to have all the earmarks of what we'll see later in Vietnam, right? You're going to see, say, for example, the forced evacuation and the burning of villages. You're going to see insurgents who attack from nowhere and then dissolve back into the jungle or into nearby villages. You're going to see booby traps, including tiger pits. That was a particular favorite, my personal favorite, but also traps that were designed to injure soldiers, not necessarily kill them, so it would take more men. You need 3 men to get one injured soldier out compared to just having one dead soldier. The imprisonment and killing of civilians. You're going to have the torture of suspected insurgents, including the water cure, which is just waterboarding, and atrocities. You're going to have atrocities committed on both sides, the insurgents and Aguinaldo's men and U.S. forces as well. Matter of fact, one U.S. general went as far as to say it may be necessary to kill half the Filipinos in order that the remaining half of the population may be advanced to a higher plane of life than their present semi-barbarous state, right? Throughout the course of the war, you're going to have approximately 4,000 American soldiers killed, about 20,000 Filipino fighters killed, and the number of civilians, we're not 100% sure, honestly, but at least 200,000 civilians killed, and some estimates actually state that approximately 1/6 of the Filipino population is going to be killed in this war. Now, like I said, you're going to have some atrocities that take place in this war, like, for example, what happens on Samar Island. Now, you have to remember that the Philippines is over 1,000 islands, and Samar Island is not a big island, but it is a pretty strategically important one, right? On August 1st, 1901, Company C of the United States 9th Infantry Regiment is going to arrive in the town of Balangiga. Balangiga is on the south coast of Samar Island, and it's close to a port, right, that was supposedly supplying some of these Filipino guerrillas, okay? So these men were sent there, these men from Company C were sent there to restore order and to root out insurgents, okay? And for the most part, they're going to see a whole lot of nothing, which is probably good. These guys aren't really trained, hardened fighters. A matter of fact, the only real experience the men of the Company C of the 9th Infantry had at this point is that a few months prior, General Aguinaldo himself had actually been captured by the United States, and these guys served as his prison guards. All right, that's about it. So on the 27th of September, 1901, Private Adolf Gamlin reported a very strange observance there in the town of Balangiga, right? He noticed that all the women and children that day left town. They were all packing up and leaving. And so he went to his superior officer and said, that's not right. That's kind of strange. All the women and children have left, and all are left in town are the men. Unfortunately, his report was ignored. On the following morning at 6:45 on September 28th, the people of the town, the men there, rose up against Company C while they were eating breakfast at long tables outside of in the town square, right? Of the 74 men of Company C, 48 of them were killed and 22 of them were wounded, right? This led to a retaliation by the United States Army that was so severe that it led to the court-martial of two field commanders. One of them was a Marine major by the name of Littleton Waller, and the other one was a brigadier general by the name of General Jacob Howling Jake Smith, right? General Smith descended on Balangiga and issued his famous Circular number 6 is his order on what to do in order to deal with this insurgency here. This Circular number 6 plainly states his desire for his forces to go in there and crush all resistance in Samar. This is what the order says. It says, I want no prisoners. I wish you to kill and burn. The more you burn and kill, the better it will please me. I want you to turn the region into a howling wilderness, and I want you to kill all persons capable of bearing arms against the United States. He basically said, anyone 10 years of age or older, kill them, right? Now, how many people were killed there at Balangiga by U.S. forces? We're never going to know. The lowest number I've ever seen was put forth by a British writer in 1990, which stated 2,500 Filipinos were killed in the retribution for the Balangiga attack, right? Filipino historians place that number at around 50,000. Which number's right? Well, I would say probably neither of those numbers, but it's probably closer to the 50,000 than it is to the 2,500, right? Now, the end of the war here in the Philippines is kind of hard to measure. I mean, when is an insurgency actually over? Officially, at this point, President Theodore Roosevelt is going to declare hostilities over on the 4th of July in 1902. And it wasn't through military might that ultimately you have the cessation of this insurgency. What's going to happen is that you're going to have a series of negotiations that are going to take place that is going to carve out a pathway to an independent Philippines, right? The United States promises the Philippines that we are going to help you build a government and then we're going to cut you loose and let you be independent just to stop this insurgency. And ultimately, that's what's going to cause things to simmer down, right? Now, the United States is going to turn internal control of the Philippines over to their own rule in 1907, and they promise to grant full independence by 1916. They'll kind of fall back on that promise, and independence won't be the Philippines won't be fully granted until 1946. Now, one of the effects of the Philippine-American War was it did certainly make the American people kind of decide that they weren't really interested in territorial acquisitions beyond the continent anymore. This idea of forward bases, that was fine. But as far as making a place like the Philippines a colony, they'd lost interest in that, right? Matter of fact, from this point forward, you're still going to have a continuation of Manifest Destiny, but it's going to cease to be about territorial gains, and it's going to become economic control, right? And you're going to see Theodore Roosevelt kind of push this forward, right? He's going to take the Monroe Doctrine, which had been written by John Quincy Adams and delivered by President James Monroe, and he's going to modify it. The Monroe Doctrine had stated that the United States was the biggest, basically, fanboy of liberty and freedom in the Western Hemisphere, and that Europe really needs to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. Now, it never said that it was going to be the champion of freedom of liberty, but it said it was going to be a supporter of it, right? Roosevelt, on December 6, 1904, in the State of the Union address, is going to change the Monroe Doctrine slightly. He's going to say, it's not true that the United States feels any land hunger or entertains any projects as regards to the other nations of the Western Hemisphere, save such that are for their welfare. All countries that desire to see their neighboring countries stable and orderly and prosperous. Any country whose people conduct themselves can count upon our hearty friendship. If a nation shows that it knows how to act with reasonable efficiency and decency in social and political matters, if it keeps order and pays its obligations, it need fear no interference from the United States. However, Chronic wrongdoing or an impotence which results in a general loosening of the ties of civilized society may, in America, as elsewhere, ultimately require the intervention by some civilized nation. And in the Western Hemisphere, an adherence of the United States to the Monroe Doctrine may force the United States, however reluctantly, in flagrant cases of such wrongdoing or impotence, to exercise an international police power. Now, this is known as the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, where he basically said, we are not the fanboys and supporters of liberty and independence in the Western Hemisphere. We are the champions of it, right? And you are going to see, like I said, you're not going to see the United States try and gain territory in the process of doing this in the Western Hemisphere and in Latin America, for example, but you are going to see involvement and interference. I'll give you an example. Between 1890 and 2009, the United States is going to intervene in the Central America a lot. Costa Rica, 1 time. El Salvador, twice. Guatemala, 3 times. Honduras, 8 times. Nicaragua, 8 times. And Panama, 9 times, including the last time overthrowing the president of Panama using rock and roll music. Why? Because America, that's why, right? We literally had the president of Panama, Manuel Noriega, surrounded, and his compound was surrounded by U.S. Marines, which then blared on huge loudspeakers rock and roll music like AC/DC day and night, 24/7 at this ungodly decibel, and had these bright lights shining in, so it was always like bright as the middle of the day, until finally the people inside that compound literally said, like, turn the damn music off. We give up. Leave it to the United States to take over a nation with rock and roll.